The city hummed with the faint buzz of late-night traffic as Ethan Harper tugged his coat tighter around his shoulders. The cafe he had just left still lingered behind him in memory, the low laughter, the smell of coffee, the warmth of bodies pressed close in the dimly lit room, but outside, the air was brisk and sharp, filling his lungs with cold clarity. He glanced at his phone, expecting a text from Kofi Mensah, his best friend from college, but there was nothing. Not even a single bubble of a message. Ethan had known Kofi for over 5 years now. Their friendship had begun on a chaotic college morning when Ethan had tripped over a stray backpack in the hallway, sending a stack of papers sprawling across the floor. Kofi had bent down with a laugh that was rich and unrestrained, helping him gather the mess. From that moment, their worlds became intertwined. Kofi, with his magnetic charm and unshakable confidence, had a way of turning the mundane into a story worth retelling. Ethan, quiet and deliberate, had learned to appreciate the rhythm Kofi brought into his otherwise cautious life. Tonight, however, there was an unusual silence. Ethan's phone buzzed finally, but not with the comforting ping he had hoped for. It was a message from Kofi. "I missed the last train." "Sorry, Ethan. Can I come over?" Ethan's chest tightened. He should have said no, of course. He had his own routines, his apartment was small, and boundaries were boundaries, but Kofi's tone carried a vulnerability that Ethan couldn't ignore. He typed back quickly, "Of course. Come over. Be safe." By the time Kofi arrived, the city streets were nearly empty, washed in the muted gold of streetlights. Ethan's apartment door opened to reveal him, Kofi, with his tall, lean frame and a hesitant smile that never suited him as well as it did in moments of need. He carried nothing but a small backpack and the weight of the night's unexpected turn. "Kofi," Ethan said softly, stepping aside to let him in. "You're soaked. The wind must have been brutal." Kofi shrugged, brushing rain-soaked strands of hair from his face. "It's nothing. I didn't want to bother you this late." "You're never a bother," Ethan replied, the words leaving his mouth before he could second-guess them. And yet, as Kofi stepped further into the apartment, Ethan felt that familiar thrum of nervous anticipation, a flutter in his chest that had been growing stronger over the years, one he had meticulously ignored. The apartment was small, but cozy. The sofa was arranged just so, a scattering of books and photographs on the shelves hinting at Ethan's quiet life. Kofi took it all in, as he always did, with a curiosity that seemed both playful and sincere. "I can't believe I missed the train," Kofi said, sinking into the sofa with a sigh. "I hate feeling stranded like this." "You're here now," Ethan said, forcing a smile, trying to mask the sudden heat creeping into his cheeks. "That's what matters." The night settled around them, heavy with the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Kofi looked up at Ethan, a question lingering in his dark eyes, one Ethan didn't want to answer, even if only to himself. There was an intimacy in that gaze, a quiet probing that seemed to bypass words entirely. "I guess I'll just crash here for a few hours," Kofi said eventually, his voice low. There was hesitation in it, a subtle plea that Ethan recognized as the same one he had felt himself, though he had never allowed it to surface before. Ethan's mind raced. A sofa was an option, of course, but it would be cramped, uncomfortable, and inconvenient. And yet, as he looked at Kofi, exhausted and shivering slightly from the night air, he felt a pull he could not name but could not resist either. "Or, you could use my bed," he said, almost against his own better judgment. "It's bigger. You'll be more comfortable." Kofi blinked at him, surprise flickering across his face, but he did not hesitate. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Ethan said quickly. "I've got blankets. You won't be in the way." As Kofi moved to the bedroom, Ethan felt the shift in the air. There was a closeness now, a subtle brush of shoulders as Kofi passed him, a warmth that lingered longer than expected. Ethan tried to focus on something else, the weather, the hum of the city, the faint ticking of the clock, but his mind betrayed him, replaying every slight touch, every hesitant glance. They settled under the blankets, each adjusting in their own space at first. Kofi was quiet, almost painfully aware of the boundaries they had never crossed before, boundaries Ethan had silently enforced in his own mind. But the night had a way of softening edges, of dissolving rules one thought were unbreakable. Ethan felt Kofi inching closer, subtly, almost imperceptibly, until the space between them was nothing more than a thin sheet of fabric. He told himself it was nothing, that Kofi had simply moved to get warm, that it was natural, but the thrum in his chest said otherwise. He could feel the warmth radiating from Kofi's side, could hear the faint rhythm of his breathing, could imagine the thoughts running silently behind those dark eyes. "I hope this isn't weird," Kofi murmured, barely audible over the hum of the heater. Ethan swallowed, his own voice caught somewhere between caution and longing. "Not at all. I'm glad you're here." The words hung in the air, heavier than either of them expected. And as sleep began to blur the edges of the room, the city, and the night itself, there was a sense of something unspoken taking root. Something fragile, tentative, and electric. Something that promised complication, yet also offered a warmth neither of them could, or wanted, to ignore. Outside, the rain continued its soft percussion against the glass. Inside, Ethan and Kofi lay in that delicate balance between friendship and something more, each conscious of the other, each testing boundaries without daring to cross them entirely, and in the quiet, unspoken intimacy of that first night, a question lingered, one that neither could answer yet, but that both would soon be forced to confront. The night held them suspended, a fragile world where the past and the present collided, where desire brushed against loyalty, and where the next choice could change everything. The dim glow of the bedside lamp painted the room in muted shades of amber as Ethan Harper lay awake, listening to the subtle rhythm of Kofi Mensah's breathing. Sleep seemed impossible, his thoughts buzzed like a swarm of restless bees, each one circling a single, undeniable truth: he had never been this aware of Kofi before. The proximity, the warmth, the unspoken weight of their shared space, it was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. Kofi stirred slightly, turning on his side, his shoulder brushing against Ethan's. It was a fleeting contact, but it sent a jolt through Ethan's chest that he couldn't rationalize away. He told himself it was nothing, that he was overthinking, that years of friendship naturally led to closeness, but his mind refused the lie. He felt Kofi's presence not as a friend, but as something charged with possibility, and the thought both thrilled and unnerved him. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft hum of the heater and the occasional distant wail of the city outside. Ethan's eyes traced the contours of Kofi's face in the soft light, memorizing the shape of his jaw, the curve of his lips, the way his dark lashes rested against his cheek. Memories of shared laughter, college late nights, and spontaneous adventures flooded Ethan's mind, but tonight, they carried a new resonance, an unspoken tension that threaded through every recollection. Kofi shifted again, moving imperceptibly closer, and Ethan's breath hitched. He didn't move away, instead, he felt a strange comfort in the contact, a warmth that seemed to seep deeper than the physical. It was emotional, intimate, the kind of connection that existed quietly in glances, in pauses, in small, deliberate hesitations. Ethan's hand rested unconsciously near Kofi's, fingers brushing the fabric of the blanket, and for a moment, neither pulled back. Kofi murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think. I didn't want to make this weird." Ethan swallowed, the lump in his throat heavy. "It's not weird," he said, though his voice trembled slightly. I like that you're here." The words were loaded, more honest than he intended, but Kofi didn't recoil. Instead, he gave a small, hesitant smile, the kind that seemed to carry both relief and quiet understanding. The room seemed smaller, more intimate, every sound amplified, the scratch of the blanket, the faint creak of the bed frame, the gentle exhale of two bodies inches apart. Ethan's thoughts tangled with desire and fear. He had always valued his careful, measured life, but Kofi's presence was a disruption, a spark threatening to ignite something he wasn't sure he could control. I'm sorry," Kofi whispered again, his hand brushing lightly against Ethan's forearm. It was accidental, or maybe deliberate, Ethan couldn't tell, and the uncertainty thrilled him. I didn't know where else to go." "You're safe here," Ethan replied, his voice firmer this time, though his pulse betrayed him. "I'm glad you came." He wanted to tell Kofi more, to confess the fluttering, insistent feelings he had buried beneath years of friendship, but the words stayed lodged in his throat. Instead, he shifted slightly, inching closer in a mirrored gesture that neither fully acknowledged. Time passed slowly, measured in heartbeats and the soft cadence of rain against the window. Kofi murmured something about missing the train, about the absurdity of the city at night, but the conversation was almost incidental. The real dialogue existed in their shared glances, the subtle brush of limbs, the unspoken acknowledgement of a closeness that neither had dared to confront before. Ethan's mind wandered back to college days, to the nights they had spent talking under dim streetlights, Kofi animatedly gesturing while Ethan listened, captivated not just by the stories but by the way Kofi's presence filled the space around him. He had loved that friendship, relied on it, but tonight he realized it had always carried an undercurrent he hadn't been willing to face, the possibility of something more. Kofi shifted again, closer still, until the warmth of his body pressed against Ethan's side. It was no longer just a subtle contact, it was deliberate, a quiet seeking of comfort. Ethan's heart pounded, a mixture of anticipation and dread. He could tell himself to move away, to maintain boundaries, but the thought felt impossible. There was a magnetic pull here, a connection that transcended logic and demanded acknowledgement. "I don't usually do this," Kofi admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "Stay like this, I mean. It's weird for me too." Ethan reached out instinctively, resting his hand lightly against Kofi's, fingers brushing and holding for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "I know," he said softly. "I'm glad it's not just me." The confession lingered, heavy with possibility, a fragile acknowledgement of something neither had dared to name before. They lay like that for hours, neither speaking, both aware of the unspoken tension that stretched taut between them. Ethan's thoughts wove a tapestry of scenarios, what this could mean, what it might lead to, what boundaries might be tested. He didn't know where the night would end, or if it would end at all, but he felt the significance of every small gesture, every subtle movement. At one point, Kofi shifted again, resting his head tentatively against Ethan's shoulder. The contact was fleeting, almost hesitant, but it sent a shockwave through Ethan, awakening a desire he had long ignored. He didn't pull away, he couldn't. Instead, he let the warmth seep in, letting the quiet intimacy grow, moment by moment, without words, without declaration, but with a resonance that spoke louder than any confession could. The night outside deepened, rain now a soft patter against the window, the city's hum a distant echo. Inside, the room seemed suspended in time, a delicate bubble where the rules of friendship and desire blurred, where the proximity of two souls created both comfort and danger. Ethan knew this night could change everything, that the line between friendship and something more was thinner than ever, yet he also knew he couldn't turn away, not now, not when the pull between them was undeniable, and so they lay, close but not touching fully, hearts beating in quiet anticipation, each aware of the other's presence, each suspended in the fragile tension of a night that promised revelation, danger, and desire all at once. The next choice, Ethan realized, would define not just this night but the boundaries of their entire relationship. Morning light spilled across the frost-covered streets as I sat in my car, the engine idling outside the cafe. I hadn't planned to come back. I'd spent 3 nights staring at the ceiling, replaying Liam's voice, Michael's voicemail, and the heavy silence that had filled every corner of our home since I returned. Something inside me had shifted, too quietly to name, too deeply to ignore. When I finally stepped out, the air bit at my face, crisp and clean. Inside, Liam was arranging chairs, the cafe empty except for the faint hum of a radio. He looked up, and surprise flickered in his eyes before softening into something else, acceptance. "Maybe, you came back," he said. That I nodded. "For the last time." He didn't move, just leaned on the counter, studying me. "Then sit. Tell me why." I took my usual seat, the same one where I'd first thawed beside a cup of coffee. My voice felt uncertain, but the words had waited long enough. "Because I owe you honesty. And because I need to stop pretending I'm fine." Liam nodded slowly. "Then start there." I looked down at my hands. "Michael and I, we used to be good. We built something real. But somewhere along the way, we stopped building and started maintaining. I thought stability was enough, but lately it feels like I'm living beside a memory." He listened, quiet as ever. No judgment, just the steady patience that made every word easier to say. I didn't come here to fall for someone, I continued. But you made me remember what it feels like to be seen. And that's dangerous. Liam's expression didn't change. It's only dangerous if you let it replace what you already promised to keep. I know, I said softly. That's why I'm here. To say goodbye. He exhaled, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at his mouth. I figured as much. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was tender, filled with unspoken gratitude. Outside, a few stray snowflakes drifted past the window, melting as they touched the glass. I meant what I said before, he murmured. About honesty. It hurts, but it's the only way any of us survive. I nodded. You were right about more than that. I stopped fighting. For him, for us. Maybe for myself too. He folded his arms. Then fight again. Not because you owe him, but because you still have something left to give. I looked at him, realizing that despite the quiet connection between us, he'd never once tried to pull me closer. He'd only held up a mirror. What I'd mistaken for temptation had been truth, dressed in gentleness. You deserve someone who can stay, I said. That he smiled faintly. Maybe I don't need someone to stay. Maybe I just need to know I helped them find their way back. The ache that rose in my chest was sharp, clean, and strangely freeing. You did, I whispered. He reached under the counter and pulled out the old napkin sketch we'd drawn together. The lines had faded slightly, but the image was still there, a cafe full of light and warmth. He slid it across to me. Keep it, he said. So you remember you still know how to build things. I folded it carefully, tucking it into my coat pocket. When I stood to leave, he didn't follow. He just nodded once, eyes steady. Goodbye, Ethan. I hesitated at the door. Goodbye, Liam. The bell above the frame chimed softly as I stepped into the cold. The sky had cleared, pale blue stretching endlessly above the white rooftops. I drove home in silence, the roads glistening with thawed ice. When I reached the house, Michael's car was in the driveway. For a long time, I sat there, watching the faint curl of smoke from the chimney. My chest tightened with dread and relief all at once. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and cedar. Michael stood by the window, still in his work clothes, eyes weary but calm. You're back early, he said. I needed to be, I answered. He studied me for a moment, and in that quiet, I realized how much distance could live inside a single room. I wanted to bridge it, even if I didn't know how. I got your message, I began. And you were right. I've been somewhere else, even when I was here. I can't keep doing that to you. Michael's expression softened, but his voice stayed steady. Is there someone else? I paused, not out of guilt but out of respect. There's someone who reminded me what I was losing. But no, there's no one else. He nodded, as if the answer hurt but also healed. Then what do we do now? I exhaled, feeling the weight of every unspoken apology between us. We start over. Not from comfort, but from honesty. Michael didn't reply immediately. Then, quietly, he said, okay. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't certainty. But it was something real, a beginning, fragile and sincere. That night, as snow began to fall again, I sat alone by the window, the sketch unfolded on the table beside me. The drawn lines seemed simpler now, less about architecture and more about faith, the belief that broken things could still hold warmth if someone cared enough to rebuild them. I thought about Liam, about the cafe, about how every word we'd shared had been both an ending and a beginning. Some people pass through your life like weather, changing the landscape, leaving traces that never fully disappear. Outside, the world was white again, quiet and forgiving. Michael entered the room, wordless, and placed a hand on my shoulder. I didn't pull away. The silence between us felt different now, not empty, but full of possibility. I glanced once more at the window, at the faint reflection of two figures standing side by side. The snow kept falling, erasing footprints, softening edges, giving everything a chance to start clean, and though I knew I would never see Liam again, I carried his words like a compass. Sometimes the wrong road leads you to the right person. This time, I intended to find the road that led home.